All right, everybody, welcome back. You're not on the Sempre Milan channel, I promise you, but you're on my YouTube channel, Martino Puccio, with my special guest, friend slash boss slash fellow Milan fan, Ollie Fisher. Ollie, so great to finally have you on my channel this time. I think we actually might have maybe once on podcast, but I don't remember. But great to have you on. Crazy window for yourself, obviously, since you run Sempre Milan full time. So I mean, what has this summer been like? Just to quickly gloss over that because it's just been chaotic since the final match day.
Yeah, chaotic is the right word. I think since I started doing this full time, I've been more used to having a quiet June. The previous
Yes.
season ends, and then there's a bit of a lull. Journalists get to go on holiday and actually spend time with their family and loved ones.
Yeah.
This time, it wasn't allowed to happen.
No.
Zlatan kind of sprung his retirement upon us in that last game of the season against Hellas Verona. And then within 48 hours, we found out Paolo Maldini and Ricky Musah had left their roles. Then as the dust was settling, we learned that Giorgio Furlani and Joffrey Mancada were stepping up into the new management role. And
Mm-hmm.
their first big action was to sanction the sale of club favourite, fan favourite Sandro Tonali. And then from there, everything exploded even further. 7 signings through the door. It looks like an 8th to follow, which we're going to talk about. It has been mental, chaotic. To top it all off, we're touring the US in pre-season.
Yes.
So my sleeping pattern, having to cover those games, is not good. I was up from 2 until 6 a.m. This morning, covering a 2-2 draw and a penalty shootout loss and Juve's revenge for 2003. So mental, chaotic, but love this club, man. There's never a dull day, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, and these were just all the purchases at the same time. We're not even talking about the outgoing players, which we'll get to a little bit later on because we're finally seeing a little bit more movement or concrete ideas. And one of those sales is helping fund this purchase of Yunus Musah. So we've gotten more updates. It's been known forever now that he has agreed to join us. He only wants us. That's been repeated time and time again with Fabrizio Romano and his spam posting. At times, it's just the only thing that he says. I found it also really funny too because obviously you guys aggregate all the news. So you get the reports from Daniele Longo, Antonio Vitiello. Pretty much every single top reporter has been saying, despite Peter Lim holding out for a higher fee, he's going to budge and it's going to be a lesser of a fee for Milan to finally get this over the line. And the latest report is that it's going to be 18 million plus bonuses. There's just going to be finer details figured out. That's coming from Vitiello. So if it comes down to that fee, and Milan are going to be paying around 18 up front and then bonuses, very similar structures to every other deal we've done this summer. This one is more of a project player. I know him, probably know him a little bit better than yourself, Torgrud and Manny included, but you do know your fair share of him. He's played so much over the course of his career in a very young one, has so many appearances in a top 5 league, even top 3 at this rate. And to kind of, mark it as more of a project player, I would say. He's not the type of player that's going to have this immediate impact with this squad, but definitely someone who could kind of fill the gaps in between when there's midfielders missing, because obviously we're going to have a lot of rotation with the competitions. Benacer's out till January. Still not a true defensive midfielder. That worries a little bit for quite a few people. I know you and I and Torgrid and many others have said that, and you guys have even stated you prefer Dominguez from Bologna to even get him in at one point. But what are your thoughts on this? Because again, this is more of an upside type of signing and not a true number 6 like we need. So do you agree with this signing after all the other midfielders that we've obtained so far, or would you rather have spent this elsewhere?
That's a really good question. I think it's a 2-part answer, really. The first part is, if I was to judge this deal in isolation, I think it's another wise bit of business from us, to be honest. It's in and around that sweet spot that that has been well documented ever since we have become American owned, and that is around 15 to 25 million euros. The players that now make up our core have been signed for amounts in and around that region, and Musah would fit the bill there. It is very, very hard to buy an all-action midfielder like him for, at that age with that potential
Yeah.
for such a fee. You see some of the prices for midfielders that are being floated around at the moment, and honestly, in that sense, it feels like it could turn out to be a snip. But project player is definitely the right description for it because he's raw. We had Filippo from Tactical Manager on our Sempre Milan podcast, and he spoke about how he's not ready to be a starter for Milan yet, for a Champions League club. He's not at that stage yet. But, you buy him while he's on somewhere near the bottom of what is hopefully a constant upward trajectory. And that is what our market is at the moment. That's the players that we're going for. We are not going to go out and spend the 50, 60 million to buy an established midfielder who instantly makes a world of difference. And it sounds like the scouting team are convinced by him as a profile as well. I've seen him described by people who've looked into his metrics and have compared all those various graphs that you can get now, that he's a bit of a Kessie light, in the sense that his natural position probably wouldn't be as a number 6 in front of the back four, but rather he does a lot of the physical side of the game very well. There's areas to work on, consistency, making sure he's always involved in the game. But I think it's a smart bit of business from us, and one where we could be looking at a potential bargain. Then the second aspect of the deal is, would I have made this signing at this very moment in our transfer window? And the answer to that is no. I would have considered him an icing on the cake signing towards the end of the window, perhaps when we get a bit more liquidity from a sale like De Ketelaere or Adley. But I would have been prioritising a more natural number 6. I think we've seen the pre-season friendlies already. Rade Krunic operating at the base of that midfield. God bless him. He's doing a job, and he will do any job that Pioli asks him for, and that's why he loves him. And fair enough, I think we've all really warmed to him as well, and have started to realise how useful his versatility is. But he is not a natural number 6, nor will he ever be one. He's not press resistant. He's not actually a great distributor of the ball. Adley's done better at that in his time as a regista in the friendlies. And he's limited technically, but that's what he is. If you want to play it simple player, then that's fine. But he isn't the player that I would want going into next season in that role, which is why I'd prioritise the signing of a Dominguez or Samuel Enrique, somebody like that. If we've got the phone lines open with Torino. But it's another name. It's another exciting name. It's another name, I think, when you look at the transfer links to the Premier League and stuff, and the fact that he only wanted to join us. Another exciting name.
Common theme that's basically been going on at this point as well. So I think that's really funny how we see the Reinders comments as well. I guess midfielders that are, they don't trust Xavi at this point after what happened at Chelsea last season, because he's already way out. I think there's a little bit of harsh criticism as well. I agreed with the Tactical Manager podcast and how, like some people were harsh critics. If you're 20 years old on a close to relegation side, chances are you're not going to have great teammates around you. If you're looking to point the finger at a 20-year-old, I think that kind of just summarizes what's going on there, because if you're going after the younger players instead of depending upon your more veteran sided players, then I think that's kind of on you, because yellow cards, they're so contextual, in my opinion, especially with him as well. Sometimes there are yellow cards where you have to make one, where it's very tactical, like a Chiellini and Bukayo Saka is always the infamous one that pops into my head.
Never forgiven.
Yeah, there's many things. That's why Memphis slugged him in the stomach a few years ago. I remember that. But either way, the Kessie comparisons, I agree with that with the physical side of things. But if you actually do want to get excited as a fan, if you don't know him well enough, he has superior technical ability at his age compared to Kessie, in my opinion. Kessie, he developed a little bit better over the course of his career, but we also didn't sign Frank with this much experience at a club like that at this point in time. And again, not to say that there's so much pressure in terms of winning with the US, but to just have that pressure to perform on a World Cup stage. People are very irrational over here, as you could tell. So when they go up and face England and you guys, when they see that type of performance, where I thought he was pretty solid against them, I thought almost every single American in that match was solid. I think that's an encouraging sign because that's the world's biggest stage. I know we try not to overreact to these types of tournaments because, we get Guillermo Ochoa when he's not facing Milan, and in a Mexico kit, he just turns back into a pumpkin. So that's essentially that. But again, moving towards the American market as well, I find it funny because this isn't like a real American in the sense of he grew up playing football in the US system. He was growing up in Europe. He has an Italian passport. So we're just not even worried about that. But to quickly wrap this one up, if it was on a scale of 1 to 10 with this signing, take out the timing of it because you're not a big fan of it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this signing of Musah?
Uh, Before I give a rating, I've got to shameless to say he came through the England youth system as well. So
Go for it. Yeah, no, I didn't remember properly, but there you go. So
yeah, so there you go. But a point on that is that he was playing with some incredible players around him as well, like
Arsenal as well, right?
England. Even though we may never win anything again, as people keep telling us, we are very good and we do have a very, very talented group of kids coming through, and Musa got to play with them, and I think that's made him a better player as well before he decided to make the right switch internationally for his career. Based on everything said, I'm going to give this signing a 7 out of 10. I don't see how it can be a disaster. It's not like you're signing, you're putting all your eggs in the basket of signing a young striker who has to give you 15, 20 goals, otherwise they'll be determined to flop. Or you're paying 35 mil for a Decatur Lara and, again, looks a flop because of the
That
limited
35 million number during like the American Elliott era is like the worst. I think
one
Bakata,
inside.
Piontek, and then
Yeah.
CDK are the three that
CDK.
are in that vicinity. So
Yeah, stay away from those kind of signings. But yeah, midfielder who has an awful lot going for him, has a high ceiling, in my opinion, will probably get better with better teammates surrounding him. A player that, by all accounts, purely wants as well, so he clearly sees a role for him in a position. And
in a big
also,
team this summer.
yeah, quality depth is so important too. Like we signed Loftus Cheek, perhaps thinking if he gives us 30 games this season, that's going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Musa can slot straight in. If he isn't a starter, if he doesn't impress that much to begin with, or needs a period of adaptation. So 7 out of 10, I think, is fair. But it could become a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the kind of the risk reward upside with this type of deal. And again, I think it gives them that flexibility because even then we kind of hear those rumors swirling. They're very soft rumors, but the rumors were there of, a potential Krunic sale, a potential Pobega sale down the road as well. We'll see. We do need to keep Italian players within the squad at this point, considering what's happened. But talking about keeping players leaving, I think this is probably the biggest story and, in my opinion, the most frustrating one. It was conveyed by our good friend Anthony Torrecrude. And listen, when you see all these players leaving for Saudi Arabia and all these teams getting phenomenal fees, whether it's from the Premier League, whether it's in Serie A with Milinkovic Savic, and you see a player that is considered dead weight and has no future within this squad. And personally speaking, I thought he was detrimental to himself. And you guys have had the article about what happened with the Croatian national team and how he had his whole rant and you got kicked out of the greatest Croatian national team of all time when you were a contributor. That's more of a reflection of who you are as a person. And if you are not getting called up to the final matches when you were a key piece in the first Scudetto title in 10 years, I think that says more about you, where you're at as a professional and a player. And to kind of bring it full circle and why he's been so frustrating is that he rejects. I know there's life-changing money when you become a professional footballer, but this is generational changing money when you're tax-free and it's 10 million euro per season, and the fee could have helped out the club as well. But it looks like Besiktas. DiMarzio was kind of reporting this is a really low-cost move and fee. You've mentioned this on Sempre Milan. Well, I'll pull up the article for a little bit. I know this will prevent a little bit of clicks, but just to get this out there so people could see and then read for themselves, we could have it for a couple minutes. Basically, you're just detailing why this would hurt the club in the short term in terms of the finances, but long term, it would be opening up moves to sign a player like Yunus Musah, who in the long term, it could play out well for us. And I kind of think that type of move is more of that 4D chess that everybody likes to talk about instead of, the checkers where we see Maldini just kind of run deals out. But right now, it's like, okay, you might have to take a loss on Ante Rebic, but if it gets in a player like Yunus Musah, who you have said in the long term, the reward is so high. If you get that, it's kind of okay that Rebic leaves at this point for this. So what are your initial thoughts on this deal too? Because it's not what we all wanted. I wanted something 7 to 8 million for this player. Definitely not going to happen at this point. So kind of detail what's going to happen with his sale and how financially it's going to affect the club.
Yeah, I think on the from a personal point of view for Rebic, it's been a really disappointing last couple of seasons. He's been plagued by injuries that haven't helped consistency for him. Both in terms of playing time and in terms of what he's been able to contribute. We all kind of hoped he'd turned a corner with that brace against Udinese at the start of last season, but it fell apart for him again pretty quickly. And as you rightly say, by the end, his professionalism and ultimately deteriorated, and he wasn't pulling his weight in training. Pioli has made it clear he doesn't have any time for passengers. We're seeing that with Origi and Ballatore being left behind in Italy as well. And I think that's an important statement. We're not just going to drag these players along anymore for the sake of it. Them and their agents have to find accommodation. Otherwise, they will be totally frozen out. We've kind of done it with Bakayoko to an extent.
Samu Castaleo as well.
Yeah.
I mean, just the amount of moves that these guys reject. And do you think that's a reflection of Maldini and that culture that he wanted, where it's just like a lot more camaraderie instead of like, hey, if you don't perform at Milan, there's the door? Because the Bakayoko situation, like you mentioned, the perfect name for this. What was he doing? 3.5 million net, or what? It was close to 4 that we had to pay for 2 seasons of that. So
yeah, I don't know, and there's deeper questions to be asked about why he even came back in the first place. Like, where was the communication between all sectors of the management if Pioli never really intended to use him?
Yeah.
Is it true that there were bonuses in his deal that meant that we would have triggered the obligation to buy, and that's why we didn't play him? If so, that looks like terrible negotiating in hindsight. That's a whole separate thing. But just on the Rebic thing, I think, professionalism had kind of gone to the wayside. Pioli not too chuffed with that. The management saying, that's it, you've got to find yourself accommodation. Now, this is where the flip side to it comes in. We kind of backed ourselves into a corner with the way that we've handled this, in the sense that we're saying to any club that are sniffing around, we really, really don't want him. It's not a case of we're going to hold out for the right offer like we might do with an Adley or a CDK because they still have some resale value. This is a player that everyone knows that we virtually got on a free transfer. There's a little asterisk to that as well.
Yeah.
But has been totally shut out of the plans, was left out of the squad back end of last season, doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, so we will therefore have to evaluate any kind of economic offer that is forthcoming.
Yeah.
And it's just one of them. That's the kind of club that is going to be interested. It is a bit strange that I thought maybe he's rejected Saudi Arabia out of principle and he wants to stay in Europe, and maybe he wants to fight for that spot back in Croatia when they get a new boss or whatever. But instead, it seems like he's willing to take quite a big downgrade in terms of league for this. God knows what the salary situation will be like. But it seems a strange fit to me as well, because I was speaking to a friend of mine who was actually a Beşiktaş fan, and he was saying he can't be pulling the same stunts that he has with Milan, where he's not trying and not,
or everywhere else that he's been,
because he will be made to feel like a public enemy. So this isn't like the easy comfort zone move. This is, I guess, try and rejuvenate your career a la Icardi and Zaniolo kind of thing.
If you want to go down, I think Icardi, but I don't know about
Zaniolo's a weird one.
Yeah.
But Icardi maybe, I don't know. And another thing, I think that people, when we think about transfers, particularly sales, everybody's so glued to the transfer fee. What is that club paying the other club for that transfer? And we are ultimately accepting a capital loss on this deal, because even though we got him on a free from Eintracht Frankfurt with Andre Silva going the other way, there were bonuses in the deal, which essentially took it up to around about 2.6 million I've got down here. And we are accepting a 500k fixed fee with some bonuses, about 1 million, 1.5 million, depending who you believe. So there's going to be a capital loss of 2 million. But in doing so, we're saving the remaining 9 million gross that we owe him on his salary between now and the end of his deal. That's the important part. We've had such a good window in terms of Plus Valenza and with the Tonali sale and the capital gains from that. we can take that little hit just to get him off the wage bill. Then those wages are free. Where did he go? Next signing through the door. So I think it's important that people look at the multifaceted aspect of players trading rather than just we only got 500k. It's more than that. It's near 10 million.
It's essentially dead weight out of the squad. And just to kind of round it out here, to finish things off, and I was kind of just highlighting this morning, and I've been on kind of the wagon of CDK being sold, but that's way down the line. I think at this point, I don't think anything will transpire. The clubs linked to him don't have the money for that. PSV is who I'm alluding to, but we're hearing closer things being settled on Fotoballatore. 4 million euro is the fee. He has to decide basically between Bologna and Fulham. The clubs have agreed to a fee with Fulham and Milan. I don't believe that's fully there on a permanent transfer with Bologna. I think it would be an option at that point, and the club does prefer to have it a full permanent transfer, which I do hope and agree with. Then you kind of hear the rumors of Origi. It's clubs like West Ham. It's other clubs within the Prem. There were links in Turkey. And then Di Marzio, who knows, this summer it's kind of been a wild card with him. I did see a recent report saying that Saudi Arabia is still interested. It's not the club that Gerard's at, forgive me, because a lot of these reporters also don't. They just say Saudi Arabia. It's just it's a
that's the thing with
term.
the Benacer link that came out. It's like Saudi Arabia have made an offer to Benacer. Like, what for? To switch national teams?
Yeah. Like,
we're going to need a bit more than that, lads.
Yeah. And hey, I mean, at this point, a lot of sites are going to be using that for clicks. It's just like, oh, Saudi Arabia was, whatever. That's for a different conversation. But to me, it's players that essentially contributed nothing, that were getting paid wages that are higher than what we just signed Noah Okafor for. The same goes for Tijani Reinders as well. The fact that we're having players like that, and this is what made Maldini and Masada so great in turning this thing around, was signing players like that. But getting rid of the dead weight has been difficult. But again, I will say this: if you can get some sort of a fee for Divock Origi and get that 4 million net, I believe it is, because I think he signed with that with the growth decree. The contract's pretty long. I do agree in a sense in what you've said on the podcast about how, Origi's trying to make it work. It's not his fault. And he was injured to start last season. He is kind of playing out of position as well. He's not a striker. Just get that out of the way. But at this point, there is that kind of out with this management and ownership, because Redbird didn't fully own Milan last summer. Maldini and Massara were here. They were the ones who signed him. So there's that kind of angle like, well, we kind of didn't sign you, and there's not really a spot for you here. So there's the door if you want to go, and if there's an offer that you would like. I just also think it would be so crucial for this club to kind of get those players out of the door, get whatever fee you can, and cut the wages if possible, and then just reinvest at those depth positions, whether it's another right back, a left back, a center back is something that we've been linked to, and I think we actually do need that. So what do you think the likelihood is of someone like Divock Origi leaving for a fixture? For me personally, I just see a loan with an option at this point. I don't see a club dishing out a fee for a player that has barely played at Liverpool, was hurt all of last season, really on the decline in his late 20s now, and has substantial wages. The clubs that would be interested, right? Like that's your point with Rebic and Beşiktaş. Like, who's going to be willing to pay those fees? It's not going to be a top club. There's not a lot of clubs around Europe that could pay those types of fees or wages rather. So what do you think happens with Origi and a couple of the other guys here to wrap up?
I think Origi definitely leaves, and without going too much into it for fear of going off on a tangent, I think it's a shame the way that that's all worked out. We were the ones who gave him a 4-year deal. We were the ones who signed him with an injury that we knew about. He only scored 2 goals, and they were meaningless, in the context of
one was a
games.
banger though. One was a banger against
they're both pretty good goals. He kind of injured himself in one of them, but we saw some glimpses from him. Glimpses that I don't think we ever really saw from Rebic, barring that first game against Udinese. And I think it is a shame how it's all played out, because I never foresaw a situation where he gets completely excluded after 1 year, and yet here we are. And I think he's nailed on to leave purely because we haven't taken him with us on the American tour. And this is a point that I've made before. I don't think it is necessarily a case of us saying to Origi, Rebic, Balotelli, probably Lazetic can be included in that, that you will never put on this shirt again. We are totally excluding you from the plans. I think it was more that we set off to America knowing that these guys were in negotiations with clubs, and it didn't make sense to take them because we were always going to accept the first suitable offer that came along. So there's the business aspect to it as well, which I think is important. Where he goes and what formula is another thing. We're not going to be in a position to demand 10 million for a player like Origi. Anything we get is a capital gain, and anything we get is ultimately a saving on his 12 million net remaining on his deal, which with growth decree works out around about 70 million euros. I mean, that's a big saving. If it were a loan with option, of course, that wouldn't be a guaranteed saving, but it can at least reevaluate him as a player for next year. And where he goes is another thing. I mean, there was even Sky mentioned that we were trying to sort of flip him to West Ham to get Scamacca coming the other way. That wouldn't appeal to me if I was West Ham, so we shouldn't expect them to pull the trigger on that deal.
There's two sides to the coin, yeah.
It strikes me as maybe he could be someone who would eventually be tempted by the idea of moving to Saudi Arabia and making big money, even if for now it seems he wants to weigh up his options and see what's next. Then you've got a player like Junior Messias, who things have been complicated for because of his injury, which is not ideal, but we know that
you can pass a physical if you
you can pass a medical with an injury. We know
it's been lost on people.
Beşiktaş were also after him, which is interesting, and also Torino, and Balotelli is now basically hoping that Bologna can get something together that we agree with after rejecting Fulham. Why he's rejected Fulham is crazy to me. I think maybe it's because he's not going to start over Anthony Robinson at left back, so he doesn't want to be a deputy again.
The irony in all of that,
it's crazy, isn't it? It all comes full circle in football. So what I would suggest now is, if we're finding it difficult to get the kind of structure of deal or perhaps the fee that we want from these negotiations within Syria, it might be the time to start talking about some exchange deals. Messias for Torino to Torino for Singo could be something that we look at with a small cash adjustment.
Huge win.
Yeah. Right back is a shaky area for us now, and I think centre back is too. I think pre-season has kind of exposed that a little bit so far. And then with Balotelli, if he's worth 4 or 5 million, or that's what we value him at, and you've got like Dominguez last year of his contract, and they're valuing him at 15 mil, 10 mil plus Balotelli, everybody's happy. There's things you can do, I think, to try and work it out. But I feel for the management when it comes to this kind of thing, because I think they're often disproportionately judged on what they do in outgoing business when it comes to the scrap metal, as I've seen it referred to.
Yeah, like what are you supposed to be getting from these types of deals?
It's so hard to sign players that have dipped so low below what you would consider their true market value. Even though we did get Origi on a free, even though we did get Messias for a few million, same for Balotelli. We want to be a club that profits from player trading, not the ones that take the hit. So we found ourselves in a difficult position, but I think first step is excluding them from the plans altogether, and we'll see what happens from here. It could be an exciting August.
And just round up with that. There's still a month left with this. I think and again, I know the Musah deal is probably going to get over the line, and that's because of the Rebic sale, if you will. So I don't expect to see another purchase anytime soon. I think you're going to see the Origi, the Balotelli stuff get resolved first. We'll see what you see in Adley. We've seen the loan options potentially out. Lille was one of the main clubs for that. I think he looks comfortable and all that. Maybe it's a loan where they want him to grow in a different position and maybe he comes back next year, or maybe it's an option. I did bring up the idea. I know he tore his ACL, but the idea of potentially getting back to Thiago Giallo from Lille, maybe there's some sort of deal to be worked out there, but I've seen more links with Inter because Inter want more of our former Primavera defenders, it seems, and they're just going to be flipping them like Villanova. Because I mean, listen, kudos to Morata for these types of sales. I guess it's just incredible, huh?
Inevitable.
Guys that you never heard of. Maybe it's my own fault. But anyways, we've both been doing a lot of work together recently with the Sempre Milan stuff, getting a lot of the stuff from your guys' podcast where it's just great information. Your video on Chukwueze being the main guy that you wanted, and you've been saying it all summer. You were dead on with that. So I'm very happy that aged well, and you got the guy that you thought would fit best for the club at this point in time. So big ups to you with that one. Just kind of give everybody else on this channel. Honestly, you probably watch both channels at this point, because you probably seen my work over there, or you've seen the work here, and it goes back and forth. But either way, just sort of plug all the stuff you write for Sempre Milan and all the video content as well.
Yeah, we are firing on all cylinders this summer. We're just trying to get bigger and better at everything that we do, and we love and we appreciate the community that we've built. On the website, you'll find sort of up-to-date news on the transfer market, and we're doing a comprehensive player analysis on every new signing that you'll find in the features section. So if you want to learn about a new signing, maybe like Okafor that you don't know much about, go give that a read. We're doing some interviews with fans and journalists from clubs that we sign players from, doing some columns and stuff as well, because I think it's important to get some opinion stuff out there. You'll find plenty more opinions on the podcast, as I'm sure people know. And we always welcome input from people who read and listen and watch what we do. That's a big part of what has made this so successful so far. We've been really fortunate to have such a supportive group of followers, and as I say, we're always open to hearing what people want us to do. And the Substack as well is something that we've just launched and we're really proud of. Isaac is the co-editor with me, and it's him who's kind of taken the lead on that, but it's something that we're all really passionate about, and we believe that it's added another layer to what we do because it's like premium content. It takes hours to research.
Just to cut you off for a second, how dead on was Isaac about the formulas and the types of deals that the club would be doing this summer? And that piece is probably one of the best ones for the projection one, and we shared it. And I remember seeing all the comments and replies being like, "This is very underwhelming. This isn't like." And look at everybody now. If the initial reaction of, I love Milanisti to death, obviously, but like, if the initial reaction is negative, chances are you have to try and think the opposite from what we've seen in recent years. But yeah, I mean, the content is great. There isn't a better place to go and get Milan news in terms of English-speaking content. The James Horncastle podcast was fantastic. Tactical Manager, every single time when it's you, Maddie, Steph, Lorenzo. Isaac doesn't really appear on the podcast too much.
No, he's
and then Badir as well. Whenever Badir feels like he's ready to go, he's very difficult to get a hold of at times. But overall, it is the place to be this summer, and there's some Americans over there as well. So you're going to see Maddie and Torgrud go crazy for Musah anytime that he breathes. So be sure to check that out. Any final plugs with just the stuff, all the socials, Sempre Milan.com, TikTok. I post the videos on there. There's YouTube. Obviously, there's the shorts and the longer form videos, and then the Instagram. Instagram's been popping big time lately, so I highly suggest you go and follow that if you have not done so already. And then any personal accounts, I don't know if you want to or do.
I'm at Ollie Fisher on Twitter. That's my personal account. I try not to tweet too much about Milan stuff on there. You'll find most of my opinions on at Kilpin Chronicle, but some of them are unfiltered, so be wary of that. And just final thing I want to say is thank you to you, mate, for all the hard work that you've been doing on the YouTube shorts, with the TikTok videos.
They've been blowing up recently, yeah, but it's all the work.
It's something that we've always wanted to tap into, and when this opportunity came around for us to collaborate, I immediately saw the exciting possibility, and it's just green. We're on the up, man. I
just bugged Torgrud one day. I was just like, because I do more things on the channel, obviously. For people who don't know, if you just go and watch, like, there's been like top 5 players heading into the World Cup, like all that type of like fun content. But I was like, I really want to do more Milan stuff. If I want to keep my longer form stuff on here, I was like, I could probably just bug you guys for it, and I'm sure you would accept the stuff. So, and that's basically what's happened. A lot of the videos have gotten so much more growth on everything. There's the podcast clips. There's me pretending to be on a podcast where I just have my headphones on and I'm talking to actually nobody, and it's just a take that I have. So if you never knew, that's how those videos are recorded. And then obviously whatever you guys say, whatever great takes or fun topics of yourselves. I think for me, I love clipping everything, but my favorite stuff is either Maddie or Badir, because Maddie is just, If you don't know Maddie, it's just the ultimate troll, but he plays it off it's so like
The
I don't know.
timing of it is
It's a very slick, sarcastic tone, and it's so good. But you need to be around Maddie or listen to Maddie over the course of time to pick up on it. It's so good. But appreciate it all. We have another month left of all this stuff, so there's going to be tons of content everywhere. Ali, we appreciate you being on here. Look, we went 35 minutes, for God's sakes. We appreciate it. We'll talk soon, and that's the end of the video. Like, subscribe, and comment.